Paradise State of Mind is your first album in 7 years. What inspired you to come back, and how does it feel to be back so far?
Oh man, yeah, it's so weird that it's been 7 years. Because like SHC, our last album, was 7 years from when we started the band. So it was like the same amount of time has passed since we put out a record. So a lot of life has happened. I feel like a different person. I feel like this record, I don't think, it's the deepest record I think Foster the People's ever made. It's my favorite work that I've ever been a part of. It was the largest mountain to climb. It's with so much life happening in between those 7 years. It was a process to get back into the studio and to be where we are right now with new music. It was a long process.
And I had the pleasure of listening to the album before the release, and I was glad to hear a lot of live instruments, actually. Glitchzig is a glowing example of this with the horns section at the end, but there is so much more. Can you tell me more about the production process?
Yeah, I basically made the record in two studios. One was the Church in London at Paul Epworth Studio, and then the majority of the tracking was at East West and the Pet Sounds Room in LA, which are both I kind of incredible studios that sound really good. And so like we were bringing in all sorts of musicians, in LA. It was like Stuart Cole on the trumpet. That's at the end of Glitchzig. That's Stuart. Jacob Sesney came in to play like sax and flute. Jarek Bishkoff did a string arrangement. We recorded a double quartet, like 8 live strings on the record at East West. And then me, Isom, and Sean, with kind of all the things that we were kind of doing in the studio. And I would say that it was important to try to make a record as analog as possible. When I was listening to a lot of the music from kind of the 70s, a lot of that dance music, the early, like the disco and then disco funk and then synth funk, like Prince and Tom Tom Club and like Parliament Funkadelic and the Gap Band and the Clash and all these artists kind of from that time that were experimenting with kind of groove oriented music, and they were using effects and they were using synthesizers, but a lot of it was this mixture of real instruments and analog effects and gear. And so I really, it was important for me on this record to try to stick true to form and keep it as live as possible, because when you listen to that stuff from back then, it's not perfect. The swing isn't perfectly edited with a computer. You can hear the humanity in it and you can hear it breathes. And like that to me is so much more interesting than a song that's made by a computer or perfected by a computer.
Right. I really enjoyed listening to it. It does feel like a step forward to foster the people,
Oh,
to
thank
foster
you.
the people's sound. And now talking a little about the lyrics, they're always very deep and philosophical. And what would you say is the underlying theme of this new album?
Hope that there's always hope, no matter what, I think that the whole world, since we've put out music, the last time we put out music was in 2017, and it was a very different world than it is now. I had to think long and hard before I made this record because I've gone through so many different emotions to my response to what's been happening within myself, but also within the world. Where I landed was I wanted to make a record that was really honest, and I wanted to make a record that had hope because I felt like that's what I needed. And I felt like that's what I wanted from artists too. Like I wanted to, but not hope in an escapist way, because then it feels false. There's themes of the afterlife that come up throughout the record a lot. Mortality, God, the d dimensions, or your perception of whatever that is. Because some people might look at what I'm talking about with the afterlife, they might look at it through an AI lens, of like, what does it look like to live forever if you put your consciousness in a computer? So it's kind of these questions of, which I think, all of us have been confronted by after living through a pandemic, after living through multiple conflicts and fear of conflicts and wars around the world. And it feels scarier now than ever because of social media. But the truth is, if you look at history, it's always been scary. we're actually living in a good time in history with healthcare and the access to food and clean water. Like we have a lot of things going for us. You know, for me, it's like perception is so important of how we perceive the world around us. And that's something that on this record, I had to bring myself back every day to not allow myself to get too dark or full of fear.
I was gonna say that it feels like it's aligned with the things that we lived through the pandemic and everything that came after that. And you guys topped the charts before the charts were ruled by TikTok trends. But then again, TikTok gave songs like Pump It Up Kicks and Sit Next to Me a second life years or months after they were released. How do you feel about this current music scenario?
I think with everything, there's positives and negatives. And with TikTok, what I've noticed, the positive is that the discovery portion of TikTok, that with young people, they can discover music that they never would have been shown or turned on to. And they don't really care or know if the artist is a personality or if they're like a fashion icon, or they don't know anything about that. They are reacting to the music itself, which to me is really pure and beautiful. You know, it's created an atmosphere where like Kate Bush could like have a massive hit or like some deep album cut from Steely Dan, or like stuff that like was never a hit can become a popular song because people are discovering just good music and reacting to what they like. So I think that that's really cool. Obviously, I think with any platform and social media, we're living in a world now where artists that are really good at social media tend to hack the system and they get a lot of attention because that's what they're focusing on. And that makes perfect sense. But now there's an expectation that every artist does that. And that part, I think, is more representative of capitalism rather than expression, the pure expression of what art is. And so that's the negative to it, is that obviously with every, a social media platform is it's a marketplace. It's a way to sell yourself. And it's a full-time job if you want to do it properly. But I'm a songwriter. I'm not an influencer. So some of that stuff I have to dance with in a way that feels comfortable for me.
Since we're talking about trends, I feel like your music helped shape the sound of a lot of music we hear nowadays with the synths and the layered production. Do you hear that too?
Yeah, I can hear that, but it's not just us. I think there were a bunch of bands from that era of time that kind of influenced culture in a certain way. And that's the beauty of art. We're all building upon things that we've heard from the past. It's cool. It's cool to be a part of it at all. I was somebody that used to deliver pizzas. I used to work in a coffee shop. I was a telemarketer. I sold kitchen cutlery door to door. I worked at a gas station. Being able to make music at all and even talk to you about it, like it's a gift. I'm grateful for it. So
Right. And you'll also be back on the road with the new album. Do you have any plans of bringing the tour to Brazil? It's been 6 years since you've been here.
definitely. Yeah, we can't wait to get back to Brazil. I don't know exactly when yet, but we'll be there.
Right. And what can we expect in terms of set lists? Because now you have such a big catalog.
That's a good question. We've been in rehearsals the last few weeks right now, going through it all. Because the EP that we put out in 2020, we didn't really get to tour either because the pandemic shut it down. So we basically have 18 new songs that we've never played live. It'll be a mixture, I think, of every record, and the new record, but the new record's sounding really amazing live. Like I'm surprised. It's a beautiful thing to see how a record like expresses itself live, and this new record with all the jazz in it. Like Glitch Sig's one of my favorite songs live now. Like I had no idea. I thought that song would be so weird that like it might not translate live. And now that's like one of my favorite moments in our live show. Yeah, we'll
Right.
see.
Thank you so much. I have to go now. I have to wrap up now.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, see ya.
See you.
Whoa.